This is a review for American Vampire Volume 1. This is a big deal for me because this is the first Vertigo book I've ever actually read. I've read no Vertigo up to this point. The reason why I got this was because it's a really hyped up book. I've heard nothing but good things. I haven't heard a single bad thing about it. It's really refreshing in the kind of time we're in right now. Vampires are, well, A, they're not actual fucking vampires, but I'm gonna get into that rant. I don't know. It's just that I've just kind of been vampired out. Like good vampires, bad vampires. I needed something to kind of get to it, and I've been really wanting to read something Vertigo for a while now, and this was here. There's a lot of reasons. The vampire thing did get me when I was kind of told what vampires were like in this book were fascinating to me. Also, of course, the big thing is Stephen King. By the way, I just tapped his name on the cover of the book, even though you can't see me. I was fascinated because I know the guy could bell out some good stories, don't get me wrong, but I was fascinated to see how he could handle in comics, because writing comics and writing books is a different thing in a way, from what I understand. I read a lot of interviews, so for all we know, I'm just spewing bullshit, but go with me on this one. I really wanted to see how he can handle a full-blown comic, and to my knowledge, it's just the first comic he's done on his own. Well, with the exception of Scott Snyder, of course. Because for what I know, he does follow the outline, but there's two stories here. There's the main story, which deals with Pearl Jones, who's an actress in the 1920s, and there's two characters here. Main characters you're gonna follow for the series as well. You have Pearl Jones. She's your average girl. She has dreams of being an actress. This is in the 20s where talkies were, like a gift from God and all that. And she really wants to be a well-known actress and kind of be immortalized and be looked at forever on the screen. But one thing led to another, and she ended up dead in the desert because of reasons. Vampires get to her, and yeah. And she's brought back as a vampire by Skinner Sweet. Skinner Sweet is, I think, like the main character. He's the character you always see in posters. He's essentially a Billy the Kid-esque anti-hero. He's not a good guy by any stretch of the imagination. The man has... The guy killed people when he was a human being, and when he became a vampire, that just made him more insane. But he has this sense of moral with Pearl. It's a fascinating thing, because he's obviously not a good guy. There's not a lot of good left in him. He's a killer, and he's intimidating, but he's fascinating. Snyder really created a character that's a fascinating read, and just like who he is, and you're not even given a good reason for why he's this crazy. He just is, and you don't need a reason. It's just amazing to see him. Because before he becomes a vampire, he acts like he's unstoppable. And when he becomes a vampire, he is unstoppable. So it puts this new sense of fear and dread attached to it. You're really afraid for whoever's going to be in his wake, because the guy, obviously, to start with, wasn't a good guy. So what happens when you give him when you give him power and an actual thirst for blood? Because the man was a notorious murderer at this point, by the time he turned into a vampire. So, like I said, there's two stories here. I guess you can call it the main story, because the King story is labeled as the backup feature, which it was. It's the first 5 issues of the series. Both are very toted by a revenge story of sorts, and the Pearl one's obviously with Pearl. She wants vengeance against the vampires who used her and then just left her for dead. She has a sense of hatred for Skinner for making her a monster now, but by the end of the book, she's somewhat accepting of what she is. She has a love named Henry, though problems happen to her. She's betrayed at a point in the book. A lot of fascinating things. But the thing is, I want to point this out. I was kind of afraid that the Scott Snyder story would. I knew it was going to be good because the man's amazing at Detective Comics. I've read his Detective Comics run so far. It's fucking amazing. So I'm really. I knew he was good, but the thing is, like many people, I do think Stephen King is probably in some cases, a god in the writing community. I was really afraid that Stephen King was really going to outshine him, and because he's only on the next book, and then when I get to the next one, things weren't going to be as good because his story's not there. But they both are at the same level. I don't feel like one person has to step up his game at all in the book. That's the best part, I guess you can say. I do feel I do feel like both stories work. Stephen King really does deliver like these just extra quirks to it. He I could tell he had fun playing with the character Skinner. Skinner is an interesting character. I mean, he obviously played with the crazy homicidal maniac part, and really played with it when he became a vampire. Skinner Sweet's obviously more in that story than the main story. He's only around his necessity in the main story is simple. He knows the vampires who did this to Pearl, and he's the reason Pearl's now a vampire. And you could tell that by the end of the story, there's going to be some type of setup to it. That these two are obviously going to cross paths, which they do in storylines. I know that because I think they're already in their third one or coming into their next story, their third story arc. With both though, you could just tell that it's a fun horror story, especially the backup. And with the backup, because there's more to that, it's not just Skinner's story. In a way, there's other side characters are a big part of this one as well. James Book, he's a big part of it. You basically follow his life too at the time. One moment here. Sorry, I had to clear my throat. He's a town sheriff. He's the one who caught Skinner. He has a problem with him because he's a murderer. But more as we go on, Skinner ends up murdering his wife. He just does a lot of bad stuff. And sorry if this does come off as somewhat of a spoiler, but Skinner turns Book into a vampire in the end, and because of that, he suffers. And I'm not going to tell you what happens at the end of him, but he's not happy with what he is. He obviously knows he's a monster, and he doesn't want to live on with that. I like that. This isn't maintained in the King story. I also love how, because the story that Stephen King's telling is told somewhat is being told by a man who was there at the time. His name, right now I'm kind of blanking on his name, so give me a second to figure it out. But I'm gonna make a quick edit, I swear. Well, quick edit is what we need. Well, there's a guy there who wrote a novel about these events, and I love how he feels that he needs to tell the story to people, to tell the truth. Now that years have gone by, he wants people to be aware that the Skinner's out there, because it's a really scary thing. Because the story kind of plots the idea of, because this isn't trying to make Skinner look like a redeemable character. This is obviously playing him off as a total psychopath who can't die. So he's roaming the earth now, and they obviously play that up for horror, and I like the way they do it. It's kind of, it is essentially the worst case scenario of what if the thing you're afraid of the most can't actually die and stays around. It's an interesting idea. Skinner's not at all redeemable. He's likable, like you're fascinated by him. Well, not likable, but you're fascinated by him. He's obviously got a weird mindset going on in his head, and he wants to. All he wants to do is kill, and now that he needs to feed on the physical life of people, it just kind of gives it a bigger dimension in my head. I could talk about this way longer, but I'm going to stop as soon as I'm done with the art here. The art's by Rafael Albuquerque. I've seen him do art before. It was really cool. Like, he's done superhero comics. I think the thing he's known for the most is Blue Beetle, if known for anything. No offense. He's a fucking amazing artist. I don't know how, but he manages to get the right feeling I want. Like, it's cartoony enough, but it's still somewhat based in reality. I mean, you gotta be a little cartoony when drawing creepy vampire figures like the one I probably showed you. By the way, that picture is the reason I bought this book at the store, if you saw it. He manages to kind of get the tone right with the art and make it creepy, especially when he goes into the King flashbacks where we're kind of in the past. Things look a little bit more hazy and smoky, kind of used a thin layer of either watercolor or an ink of some sort, because things look really dark, like you're looking through it through a smoky lens, and I like it. It really gives you a sense of it really ratchets up the tension that things look grim, and it makes things look grimmer. And I'm really liking the way it's used here. I also love that the color, it's not afraid to have color here. You usually see it with stuff like blood, of course, but I don't know why. When bright colors are used, it just sticks out just right. I'm not saying, like, bright colors are used, but I do like it. Like, you'll see, like, yellows and tints, and it really contrasts. I normally don't get this gushy over art, but I just love the way it looks. So, obviously, after all this, I'm obviously telling you to get this. I highly recommend you go pick this up. It's only one volume's out right now. I think volume 2 comes out in May as of the recording of this video. You can obviously get it cheaper than $25, but it's totally worth $25. Both stories work off each other very well in a way, I feel, and I know Snyder can really belt out writing now. So when the next arc comes, I'm pretty sure he can, kind of keep his end of the bargain up in terms of keeping you entertained. So thank you, people.